Damage control, Spilo strikes again. Look, guys, just listen. You know me. I'm going to be fair. But I'm also not going to be hyperbolic. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Director's take, opening up the conversation. Dude, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I was a little nervous before starting stream. I haven't been this nervous in a long time. Okay, let's zoom in just a wee bit here. Haha, wee. Okay, hey everyone. There's been a lot of talk about 6v6 lately, and it's only intensified in recent weeks since we posted our latest Director's Take and made a Twitter post with a promise to talk about it in the future. Well, now is the future, and that is the next piece, so let's go into it. Wait, let's not get into it quite yet. This is a pretty complex and nuanced topic. Oh, it's my word! All right, it's my word. And it gets to the beating heart. Let's actually move this over so you guys can see. It gets to the beating heart of what makes this game tick. Our players have different opinions and preferences about the ideal number of players in an Overwatch match, and so does our team. We're a microcosm of the broader community and discuss this internally. I'm hoping that this piece will serve as an introduction to our own discussion and a jumping off point to engage with all of you. Hey, I don't know, like an hour-ish probably.
So just make it warm and put
whatever, yeah, sure, thank you. Okay. I'd also like to set a few expectations and ground rules. First, it's pretty long. Creators are going to lose their voices reading this one aloud. Ha, never. Not me. I'm just built different. Creators, if you like a TLDR, the what's next section should suffice. Secondly, I'm not here to tell you what you ought to like or even what's empirically better. Okay, that's crucial right there, right? This is an opinion piece. I think that's regardless of what you think, there's strengths and weaknesses to both sides of the argument. I think from like a game design, integrity of the design standpoint, I think 66 has a much better track record. 5v5 is where we're at right now though, and might be the more easy, it's kind of hard to say. Like 66 in terms of game design, in terms of like the psychology of the tank problem, it definitely has a much better and much easier solution. 5v5 maybe has a better solution for choke points and maps and autonomy of individuals, and in terms of queue time. So we've talked about it. If you guys want more thoughts on this, the Smito versus Spilo debate on Smito's YouTube does a good job of, I think, clarifying my opinion. Secondly, this is a game, and your preference for fun is relative to your tastes, ability, and experience. Lastly, there are years of decisions that affect such a fundamental piece of Overwatch. Some of you might be intimately aware of these, while others might not. Before diving in, I'd like to set the stage and give some context on some of the larger changes to the game that ultimately culminated in the 5v5 format we have today. Nice. Maybe not a better track record, Poivin. What I'm saying is that 66 has a more obvious solution to some of the tank psychology things, but we don't know immediately how that would play out. Okay. Historical context. There have been 3 large format changes to Overwatch, and the first happened shortly after the game launched. This was hero limits. Before this, there could have been a number of a particular hero, any number. You could have 6 Genjis or 6 Reinhardts. The winner of Team 4's internal tournament was 1 Winston and 5 Zenyatas. We called it Quinston. Zenyatta orb stacked with no cap to healing at the time. It was glorious and terrifying. That's a lot of healing. Wow. Okay. During early development, it was necessary to have duplicate heroes per team. Our first core combat monoscale only had 4 heroes. As the roster grew, this was no longer necessary and also introduced issues. Overwatch heroes had very distinct kits with impactful abilities. Stacking abilities could be fun, but it posed challenges to balancing many of these abilities in game. People reference double barrier, but back then you could have 6. Imagine cycling 6 immortality fields. The number of team compositions and strategies available was huge. The variety was great, but we didn't want to feel like we could ever truly balance the game without severely watering down our characters, so we made the choice to impose a limit of 1 hero per team. This essentially solved the issue of ability stacking, but it did have a few side effects. It traded some of the creativity and putting together team compositions for a more consistent and balanced experience. It also took away some choices from players. If someone wanted to play Tracer, but you were already Tracer, he knew what he was doing, they would be unable to. A theme of this and future decisions was limiting match variety as well as player freedom and creativity in order to create a more balanced, consistent, and competitive experience for players. This is the key thing for me. He's right. Limiting options not only can create a better experience, but it actually, in many ways, opens up creativity because it enforces a basic structure and allows for more options to be available. The problem with removing options is a lot of those options will be optimized. Quinston, 3 tanks, 3 supports, and the same tanks and supports. When you enforce a careful, cautious, and calculated limitation, you introduce more options. It's as simple as this. If you could have 3 tanks and 3 supports and not need to play DPS, in many ways in Overwatch 1, that was the way to go. And you would have had to have nerfed supports and tanks so hard to the point to where they would be very difficult for DPS to be viable in that situation. And that, I'm speaking on this just very lightly, but this is a great example of like, oh, they removed our hero variety. They crushed our creativity. Sorry, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Any game in the world has rules. And finding the balance between creative expression and the basic structure of the gameplay is crucial. And I'm sorry, right, exactly. I know a lot of people out there like, oh, roll Q killed the game. Screw you. You're an idiot. Respectfully. It was terrible. No hero limits ruin the game. No, you're an idiot. Okay, remember this point because we'll touch on it a few more times in this piece. I think the hero limit rule was a great decision, and we would make it again. The other 2 large format changes have a lot of positive benefits, but are not as clear cut. The second large change to the game's format was the move from open to role queue, which limited team compositions to 2 heroes from each role. Before role queue, there was no enforced 2-2-2 team composition, and players had the freedom to select any role that they liked once they loaded the match. With open queue, teams had a lot of freedom of choice about what heroes and compositions to play, but there were quite a few problems that role queue intended to address. Prior to implementing role queue, there was a stark imbalance in the number of people playing each role within each match. Damage was by far, and still is today, the most popular role, and tank was by far the least popular. In fact, seeing matches with 5 or even 6 damage players in each team was not uncommon, and anybody that says otherwise is gaslighting you or a strictly high-ranked player. I am so tired of hearing people attacking role queue because, in GM, we would... No. If you played in plat, gold, silver, bronze, I did all of these before role queue. Diamond, match quality was significantly impacted by lack of role queue. It sucked. You had the tank with no supports or 1 support, tilting at the DPS not getting picks, and rage swapping Roadhog or going Widowmaker. It happened all the time. 20, 30, 40% of games. And that's not even addressing the OP stack of support and tanks. It's just false. And anybody that says otherwise is either gaslighting you themselves or played in a higher rank with a higher competitive level where people were more willing to swap because they just wanted to win. Lower ranks, it just didn't happen. And the problem is low to mid ranks was a vast 90% or more majority of the play race. I literally changed hero pools to fit this because I lost so many games. I got forced into playing Mercy, I got forced into playing Ryan, I got forced into playing Winston, and it's just how it happened. This is the one that really tilts me because there are people out there that defend this and it's just really silly. It's really silly. Okay, the role imbalance frequently led to wildly imbalanced matches between teams. The game played better when heroes from all 3 roles were selected. The disparity caused social issues as players would try to pressure others into playing tank or support roles even if they didn't want to. It made balancing heroes more difficult so they couldn't balance around a certain role ratio for each team. True. And it even made introducing new characters. Like you could even, you want to talk about getting boosted. You could get boosted being a consistent support and tank player in Overwatch 1 because you were just willing to be playing and enjoying heroes that other people didn't want to play. You could literally boost yourself by playing main tank in Overwatch before role queue because there were a certain percentage of players that just didn't want to play tank. So you could create a massive advantage for your team just by picking a character. It created this statistical anomaly where a lot of tank and support players would boost themselves, even though they weren't that good at the game, even though the roles weren't necessarily OP prior to break. It's just that people didn't want to play. So you could create an immediate 5% advantage, 10% advantage for your team winning just by picking the role that other people didn't want to play. And it even made introducing new heroes more difficult since any new carrot had to take into consideration hundreds of different team compositions and abilities that could overlap with it. The move to a role queue format was aimed to mitigate these challenges. And obviously people talk about GOATs as well. This definitely was a thing too. Now GOATs could have been solved by addressing sustain issues. I agree with a lot of the other content creators that talk about this as well. I do think that GOATs was solvable, but the thing is that GOATs was only a percentage of the problem. It wasn't just the problem in of itself. Okay, Brightside, thank you for the sub. Moving to role queue solved many of these problems and added some additional benefits to the game as well. With role queue in place, matchmaking is based on skill within a given role, not just skill overall, right? And I know some people don't like that, but that's how it goes, right? You're not your global ranking, but you're ranking within the role. Some players have wildly different skill ratings per role, so the ability to matchmake around set roles provide a big, measurable boost in match quality. Role queue also solidified the identity of each role, and the fantasy of doing that role's job became clearer. However, the switch to role queue system did have some downsides, the largest of which was much longer queue times. And this is true. And this is the other problem that people want to introduce when it comes to high rank bias, because what rank do you think was affected by this the most? And the answer is obvious. It's the rank that already didn't mind role queue as much, or the lack of role queue, because they were more willing to flex and fill. It's the higher ranks. It's the higher ranks. So the higher ranks were met with the brutality of the higher queue times more so. So this basically emphasized their already existing bias, vice versa. Prior to role queue, the matchmaker just needed to find 12 players of a similar skill level in order to put matches together. After role queue, it needed to find 4 players of each role to make a match. The total number of players queuing has no effects in this. It's almost solely governed by the ratio of people queuing for the least popular role. In other words, you could have 1,000 tank players or 100 tank players. The only thing that matters is the ratio of tank players to DPS players. And let's be honest, tank player was the most least common role. So you could have 1 million DPS players queuing, but if you didn't have at least a couple thousand tank players, the queue times were going to be brutal. Given the game's lower relative ratio of players queuing for tank, there you go. Then other damage and support roles, queue times went way up. We'll go into detail on this later. The team tried to address the vet imbalance in various ways. Okay, thank you, Surly. We introduced a priority pass system that gave players who play low demand roles tank a shorter queue when they switched to damage. This had a positive effect for several weeks, but its influence quickly faded. We also introduced systems to reward players for playing tank, eventually giving them a loot box and a bunch of XP. None of these were able to put a dent in the demand for playing DPS. Damage queue times drifted a bit lower over time, but much of this was due to the introduction of open queue competitive and the permanent loss of damage players unwilling to wait that long for a match. Now, one of the things that I don't know if they're going to touch on here, but I'm going to point out here, part of the thing that killed tank queues was the tanks that were meta. It was misery to play Reinhardt and Winston at this point in time. I stopped playing Reinhardt and Winston around this point in time because this was right before role queue. Playing into Brig sucked. Like, it was actual cancer. Not peeling, but frontline Brig. It was cancer. You had every single thing playing tank into you. Winston was not fun to play. Ryan was not fun to play. Diva was not fun to play. You played Orisa or you played Sigma. Or you played Roadhog or whatever else. I mean, even Ball was hard at times. Now, I'm painting with a broad brush here. Obviously, a lot of metas changed and shifted over time. But there's a reason why Double Shield was so popular. It wasn't just because those characters were strong, because they obviously were, but because those characters did not have to interact with the worst aspects of playing tank. And that really killed a lot of people's motivation to play tank. So, disaster. So it's and we have to introduce that nuance. I don't think that this removes the points here. I still agree, but we have to again nuance here, right? We have to make that point. Bullskunk, thank you for the raid. I appreciate it. So we keep going here. There were additional drawbacks with role queue. I mentioned earlier that many of our decisions made improvements to the game at the cost of match variety and player freedom. Team compositions were now locked. This is another step to more consistent experience, but sometimes consistency can start to feel samey. Well, I wonder why. I'm having a great stream, Bull. I appreciate it, mate. There were some pretty exciting metas in the pre-role queue world, and swapping to a hero of a different role mid-match was often a much bigger change and more exciting than swapping to one of the same role. Like Hero Limits, role queue took away part of the freedom in selecting heroes that served as the base of Overwatch, but I often wonder if the success of it is as cut and dry as that of Hero Limits. Could there be an in-between version that softens the original problem without solving them and also isn't quite as restrictive as the current role queue system? A bit more on that later. And again, I want to emphasize, I would love to have actual statistics here. Maybe I'm misremembering, but a lot of the more meta DPS, a lot of the more meta tanks, a lot of the more meta supports were just not fun. Ana wasn't relevant for years. Zen was relevant in GOATs and with Brigitte, but obviously, Zen is even in a problematic character as a whole. Your boy Karn, thank you for the sub. Lucio wasn't super good outside of a lot of the more speedier comps. It was a lot of BAP. It was a lot of Brigitte. There was some Mercy. There was Hanzo. A lot of the spammier stuff with the double shield was good. Genji was not good. Tracer was not good for a long period of time. Yeah. The third major format change. These challenges, as well as longer queue times, led us to the third most recent format change of the game, the shift from 6v6 to 5v5. This is almost a blog within a blog, but we're going to cover 3 things. Why we switched, queue times after the switch, and what the team thinks about 6v6. Here we go. Why we switched to 5v5. There are many reasons behind the transition to 5v5. When we launched Overwatch 2, we talked about the greater individual agency that players could have in 5v5. This is true. Don't let anybody gaslight you otherwise. Tank players, you have more engaged options. You might have fewer choices, and you might be victimized by rock, paper, scissors more. But I saw a video, one of these 6v6 videos posted by another one of these no-name YouTubers, no offense. Everyone just milks subscribers and views off of lazy Overwatch hate. And it was talking about how, like, oh, you know, 6v6, you could take flanks. 5v5, you can't take flanks, so you can't do anything in your own. It's so silly. It's so stupid. 5v5, there's more space. There's more space. I'm sorry. No name shade. Well, I only do it because it's like everyone's like, get out, like, oh, I'm just going to do a trash Overwatch video. Some crappy thumbnail and crappy lazy effort repeating the same arguments by every other content creator out there and farm views. I hate it. It drives me nuts. Overwatch is a team sport and requires players to rely on others to be successful. This was even more the case previously, and the game could be frustrating if your team was out of sync. Many times, fight in 66 couldn't resolve until ultimate abilities came online. Correct that until ultimate combos could be executed to break through 2 tanks worth of mitigation supported by high uncontested healing output. So I'm glad that they said both 2 tanks worth of mitigation and high uncontested healing, because really both were a problem. As I spoke with Spilo in our debate, I think the high uncontested healing output was by far the bigger problem. But tank mitigation stacking was a problem, specifically within chokes. It was easier to pressure those tanks when it wasn't supported by high uncontested healing output. Again, both things are true. Let's address the nuance here. The world of 66 could have really high highs, but really, really low lows. One of the design goals of 5v5 was to try to raise that floor, even if it was at the expense of some of those high moments. Overwatch 2, my scroll wheel's not working, also has greater emphasis on first-person shooter gameplay. There's less damage mitigation and crowd control, and players get to shoot at enemies more. Crowd control could take players out of the game for extended periods of time, especially when they change back-to-back. A 5-second Sombra hack, may freeze, Brig Bash, honestly, Burst Assault could all happen consecutively to one player. Typically, a tank who could often survive this onslaught, at least in game. Their real-life mental health was another story. Now, I know everyone has seen the Overwatch 2 clips. Everyone's seen them. This is still possible. But let's, again, be objective here. It is not good right now, but it is better. It is better. It is better. This is still a factor, but this is not. This is still a factor, but this is a lot less a factor. And this is still bad, but it's not near as bad. And this doesn't stun as much. Like, everyone wants to remember, oh, Overwatch 2, you can still get hacked, boop, whip chop. And as a solo tank, you're often the target of those things more often. That is true. But, the floor for Overwatch 1 tank experience was lower. It was worse, potentially worse, especially if you didn't get the right tank, and especially playing in the wrong comp. It was. I'm sorry, it was. It didn't happen all the time. You did have the other tank to be able to pull attention and pull some of those cooldowns away from you, but it happened. You can literally look up the clips right now. And it's why I quit playing tank. It's why I quit playing tank. Because of this. I couldn't handle it. Damage heroes often complain that the role was the least impactful relative to the strength of super powerful tank synergies and support heroes undoing their playmaking. The emphasis on ability cooldown management, ult tracking, shooting barriers instead of players, and not big enough timing windows to just shoot enemies and get eliminations were all factors compared to this feeling. I agree. I think a lot of this was balance work. I think that if you had addressed support and addressed tank mitigation, that this was an impactful, a solvable issue. And again, a lot of it was the tanks and supports that were meta. This was as much a hero balance as it was a format issue. Okay. So support heroes also had to focus almost exclusively on healing since there were bigger team health pools and more incoming damage in the field. And 5 they had more agency and more damage in duels. Now this is, I think, one of the stronger arguments for 5v5 objectively, maybe even more than queue times. Maybe even more than queue times. This is something I brought up with this when we were talking with Spilo. This is true. This might be solvable in different ways. Maybe with the heal passive introduced, maybe it's not as big of an issue. But this is objectively true and one of the biggest upswings for me in terms of making support much more interesting in Overwatch 2. You have much more capability to be able to do your own thing and assist DPS and or put pressure yourself. heal bonding in Overwatch 1 was a lot more powerful and a lot more necessary. Tank synergy wasn't always fun. It slowed the game down and people stabilized it, but sometimes it actually ground it into a halt. No pun intended. Guys, get it? Ready? Haha, halt, Orisa. People point to the double shield meta as an example of this. It just wasn't about double shields, though. The ability to stack a very defensive heavy lineup, especially in game modes that required a team to push through a small choke, caused a lot of matches to feel like there was no progress at all. I coached professional Overwatch for 5 years, and chokes were not just a bronze player problem. They were the emphasis of so much coaching that we would literally have VOD reviews on 2CP map chokes, just how to break. And by the way, this was not even double shield meta. This was a dive meta. But the chokes were so difficult to break. We would have repeated VOD reviews over weeks and months on strategy on how to break these chokes, with and without 2CP. Eichenwald, Midtown Now would be a much harder experience. A lot of it could have been solved with map design, so I'm not going to put it all in 6v6. But 6v6, if implemented today, would require a revisiting of map chokes all over again. Okay. The ability to stack a very defensive heavy alignment, The game is faster now, and it doesn't typically stall out. It feels like there's more room to move around a map without the need to earn every inch of it. In 5v5, fights are often less focused on moving around a death ball, and there's more room to take angles, flank, and duel other players, which brings in more of the first-person shooter gameplay. And this is where Samito's argument is that, yes, you have the opportunity to take angles and flank and so on, but because a lot of the times the tanks are just tankier, it removes a target that you can shoot. So instead of being able to shoot 6 targets, you now can really only shoot 4 because there's one fewer tank, and that tank is oftentimes not a viable target to shoot. Now, that's not always true depending on the situation or the target that you're playing, but it is a nuance that we have to introduce because it is true. It is true. Okay, while 6 users can have high moments, it's also hard to follow. Tracking 9 other players is easier than 11. That is also objectively true. There are fewer visual effects on screen, especially during big team fights. Overwatch is a pretty demanding game, and moving to 5v5 made it a bit more cognitively manageable. Lastly, one of the biggest benefits of 5v5 is dramatically reduced queue times. Let's explore that. The chart below shows ranked play queue times per role after the introduction of role queue, compared to the queue times per role in Overwatch 5v5 role queue. As you can see, the shift to 5v5 role queue dramatically reduced queue times for players in all roles, and most notably, the damage role, which is the most popular role. So 6v6 damage role, post queue, lifetime. 6v6 post role queue, support, lifetime. Tank, lifetime. Now, devil's advocate, Lucario, thank you for the subscription. I think this is very enlightening, but I am going to say that this part of this gap is because of 2 things. One, well, really the only one, it's development. It's development. Post-roll queue was the beginning of the end of Overwatch 1 in terms of lack of development, new content, new heroes, and so on. We went pretty much role silent. Remember, keep in mind that role queue was introduced right after Sigma's released, in which case the only characters that we had, if I remember correctly, was Echo? I don't remember where Wrecking Ball fell exactly. So there wasn't a lot of development in the game for quite a long time, and that's going to affect role queue time slightly. I know it said that population does not affect things, but obviously if there's new and shiny things for the tank player to log into, then we're going to have fewer ratio issues. So I think that's probably a small factor in this as well. We have to admit, I think. I think Ball was first. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. So anyway, long story short, this is very enlightening. I don't care what stance it is. This is crazy. Oh, you're right, default. Thank you. I mean, there you go. And there's a lot of nuance here. You know, I'm sure this changed from season to season, and there might have been times when tank was bad or DPS crews were bad, but this is crazy. This is no asterisks could explain this, really. No asterisk can explain this. That's insane. And almost equally insane is this. I mean, that's half, guys. That is half. Half! So, the biggest factor driving the difference between Overwatch and Overwatch 2 queue times is the ratio of players queuing for each role. We hear players speculate that the long queue times are a result of not enough players playing Overwatch. That isn't the case. I mean, obviously, yes. But instead, that relative to other roles, players generally queue tank less, leading to longer wait times for all while we wait for a tank to free up for the proper match. So in practice, the actual ratio of players queuing for tank damage support is much closer to the 1-2-2 format than the previous 2-2-2 format. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't tank players quitting. It just means that despite tank players quitting, the ratio is still closer to what we need for faster matchmaking. Now, you can argue still that in terms of the quality of the game experience, you'd rather have a longer queue time. Yeah, you're entitled to that. You're not wrong. But I think this is still brought up as like, oh, the queue times aren't actually better in Overwatch 2, and the answer is you're wrong. So if that was never your opinion, that's fine. That doesn't necessarily shoot down the 66 argument by any means. As a result, the 5v5 role queue formats better mirror actual players' interest in each role, and making the switch result in shorter queues. The sharp drop-off in queue times of October of 2022 is when Overwatch 2, along with 5v5, shipped. The queue times of all heroes dropped and are now much shorter. This was all because the game required one fewer tank. One fewer tank. Fewer, Aaron. Fewer! If you look at the current queue times, you can see that there is a still lack of tanks compared to our other roles. Just flipping the switch and returning to 66 would likely cause a return to previous queue times or worse. Regardless of the amount of players in game, queue times are always reflective of how many people are queued per role. In other words, the main driver of increased queue times is the ratio of players queued. Since there are fewer players queuing as tank, queues would likely go back the same way that they were before. The rule is if you can count it, the number is fewer. If you can't count it, but it's an uncountable quantity, it's less. There's been a lot less rain recently. But there's been fewer raindrops. Nerd. The game started its life with 6 players in each team. I discussed why we moved away from 66, but that doesn't mean it's without any merit. There were moments in madness that could happen with 12 players in a match that just doesn't quite coalesce when there are 10. It was almost too much to keep track of. Correction, it was too much to keep track of at times, but that was part of the charm. There are big moments in Overwatch 2, but they don't quite have that same chaotic, over-the-top feeling to them. Part of that chaos allowed players to feel less pressure in a match. I really hope that they address tank. Okay, I think it looks like we're going there. There was an extra player to take up the bit of slack for someone that was performing poorly, and since that player was a tank, they had quite a bit of impact. They need to address tanking here. They need to address the feeling of being the solo attention of tanking here. This has to be addressed. And since there were a lot of more hit points and defensive capabilities to burn through, which had a stabilizing effect on gameplay, teams would fold a bit slower than they do now. We went over some of the issues of tank synergy earlier, but having 2 of them allowed one to focus on protecting their backline while the other held ground or pushing the enemy team. The tank role had a lot of depth in understanding how to work with the other tank on the team. This part of the mastery curve took a long time to learn, and for the small group of people devoted to it, that was part of its allure. Oh, beautiful. We mentioned the difficulty in balancing tank for 66 earlier, but the past year and a half has shown us that there are a lot of issues with balancing tanks for 5v5 as well. For much of Overwatch 2, tanks have been fairly balanced, but one of them becomes a powerful outlier, like Malga, that could be felt strongly in the world of one tank. We need to talk about they need to address the difficulty of the solo tanking here. At least to know that I think that people are aware that it's an issue, I think. And maybe we're not there yet. Because the attention of the 2 tanks is now put on 1. So there's a lot more psychological and direct pressure put onto the solo tank. And that is the biggest problem in 5v5. The biggest problem. What's next? There was a lot of setup. I think I put more effort in this than any essay I wrote in college. So where do we go from here? At the end of the day, we want to make the game that players want to play. Because of the challenges mentioned previously, we are focused on making 5v5 the best experience that it can be. However, because we operate as a service to our players, we always remain open-minded to reevaluating our decisions based on your actions and feedback. to give you the best game experience that we can. Rather than introduce a disruptive permanent change to the game, we prefer to explore the space further and make changes based on that exploration. Nice. With that said, we're looking at running a series of events to try out different core team composition formats in Overwatch 2. The community has just once or twice suggested why not put various forms of 6v6 in the game in order to gauge the results? Now, it's funny. I'm going to call out one of my buddies here. Mr. PK, you see his profile picture in the top left? He helps me out with a lot of my projects, a lot of stuff. He has said that I should do this, that I should do a content piece about pushing people to try out, put the money where your mouth is and play 6v6. It sounds like the Overwatch community agrees. We're exploring how we can test out different forms of 6v6 in the game to gauge the results. This is taking some time, however, for reasons that may not be readily apparent. The first and honestly largest reason is the need to do this in a way that allows the game to have optimized technical performance. I'm referring to frame rate and memory constraints with 12 players in a match. There have been quite a few upgrades and additions to Overwatch 2 that have an impact on the performance of the game. These range from new features like allied outlines and enabling healer vision by default, the addition of more technically demanding hero kits, as well as visual upgrades to UI, heroes, and maps. And did I skip this paragraph? No, I didn't. Yeah, no, I didn't. Okay. In the 66 setting, these upgrades can have a significant impacts for our players, causing the game to underperform in older systems. Overwatch is a fast-paced game, and maintaining a game that runs smoothly across all platforms is important for the player's experience. While a limited time test could arrive sooner, the team is still investigating exactly how long it would take to permanently increase performance across the game. This would be a large effort that would most likely take at least several seasons to accomplish. Okay, no problem. Another issue, and this still gives me anxiety, about opening this Pandora's box is what to do with queue times if enough players prefer 66 to keep some form of it around. In other words, okay, what percentage of the player base do you guys think is going to prefer or want to try 6v6? Just take a guess. Okay, now what percentage of what role? What role? Go ahead. What role do you think is going to be playing? Probably disproportionately more 66. Right. So there's going to be a larger percentage of tanks, at least comparatively to other roles. And that's dangerous because now you're going to be exacerbating the normal game quick play and ranked queue times. Now you might be like, well, screw him, man. Get fricked. You should have done it. Yeah, 6v6 on top. Yeah. But we don't want to cause... We want to give it be a good test that we can pull results from without like making the rest of the game feel like crap. You know what I'm saying? Thanks. Now we'll have to wait and see. The team was not able to solve this issue previously. While we still have some ideas now, there's no guarantee that they will work. Is there a world where people are willing to live with long queue times to play this format? Maybe. Oh, but that's the other thing too, right? Will queue times be a format? But that's a pretty risky move to make. We also have tens of millions of new players that have only played 5v5. We want to be openly mindful not to frustrate those who like the game as it is today. I love you too, Benish. Like I said, I woke up in the middle of the night, cold sweat, was thinking about Benish. The outcome of these tests would give us a lot of valuable information to consider moving forward. We'd run the tests for a few weeks and gauge interest from the community. Then we'd measure the impact it had on other experiences in Overwatch 2, like 5v5 arcade, that kind of what we talked about there. We take the lessons from the playtest to see what we can learn about the mode from the current game ecosystem. For what to test, we're getting to the point here where I'm gonna be a little bit more selective about whether we run. It's both for future us to figure out. I'm going to jump on a soapbox for a moment. All right, guys, clench your cheeks. When you look at the changes to Overwatch since its inception, it's clear that many of those who have reduced some of the variety within an Overwatch match. We get feedback from some players that Overwatch can feel the same from game to game. While much of this gets attributed to 5v5, we feel there's more at play here. Besides running experience with 66, we'd like to run some that examine the ways we tried solving previous problems, specifically with the goal of bringing some of the freedom back to an Overwatch match without the severity of some of the issues that accompanied it. For instance, we think that there could be ways of putting a game together that aren't quite as rigid as a set composition, but not as loose as open queue. We'll be running at least one quick play hack based on this idea in Season 13. There's some gotchas to this direction, but after reading 400 pages of this blog, I hope that you're all able to see that there are trade-offs to many of the decisions that go into this game and into any game, really. I love the experimentation, man. I love the experimentation.
Food's on the stove for you.
Thanks, man. Drive safe. I won't. I for years, I'm just so thankful that we're willing to experiment stuff. I'm so glad that we're able to experiment with stuff again. Kudos. Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks, man. Bro, thanks, man is a universal, man. Come on, man. You get what I'm saying. You guys stop distracting me. Listen, guys, I've been married for 10 years. When you guys have been married for 10 years, you guys can throw stones. To wrap it up for now, your feedback has driven both our inspiration and commitment to testing new ideas in game. We want to be super thoughtful about how we implement new ideas into the live game because there are millions of players who jump into Overwatch each season, and we want anything we put in game to benefit our community as a whole. Yeah. Whatever you say, man. Ultimately, the Overwatch team wants to continue building the game. This is the start of the conversation. This isn't the last time we're going to be getting to 5v5. Yeah. That's it. That's it. Okay. I mean, yeah, sure. I think this was, with the amount of pressure being put on Aaron to communicate on this topic, I think he did a good job. I would have liked a little bit more conversation about being aware of the solo tank problem. And I think this is something that I've even, been Mr. Grumpy Pants about it, even with the Alec Dawson interview. I think that, I'm not sure. I would like to see more clear communication that they understand exactly what the solo tank problem is. And that why sometimes the rock, paper, scissors thing. And even addressing some of the little things about why some of the 66 issues were maybe more hero balance issues or hero design issues and the heroes that were meta, right? So, but there's a lot of expectations and there's a lot of boxes to check. So, I appreciate it. And I think everyone's going to feel this is about as inoffensive as you can get, right? They're looking to test things. We can look forward to it. If 66 is a possibility or more flexibility with the format changes, that is on the table. Congratulations. That is on the table. Oh, Zach, thank you for the donation. That is a classic notification.
Hello. I climbed from Silver 1 to Plat thanks to seeing how you go over VODs and your Lucio VOD reviews.
Nice, man.
Now
Congratulations.
keep that rank and climb to Diamond. Good looks and thank you.
You're very welcome, man. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. What are your thoughts on making the ability to swap heroes more costly? There's been a lot of discussion on that one. Talk about hero bans, talk about removing. I'm a fan of removing the ult charge retention entirely. I know SVB is a big guy, a proponent of that as well. But I think that there's a lot of things that you can tweak, a lot of things that you can test. And I think hero ban specifically and making hero swaps more punishing is frankly not something that I have put as much time into. I've put more time personally into some of the more hero design aspects of things because that's the thing I find more interesting. But yeah, it's worth putting into. Negative ult charge with swapping? Probably not that. That might be a little bit too intense. Let's put it that way. What are your thoughts on the relative impact of tanks on the team versus the rest of teammates? Great question. I had an idea. I might run this by the developers and see if they're interested in testing it, or maybe they're not interested in testing it. I don't know. Here's an idea. Chat, how do you test the impact of a role? How do you test the impact of a role? I had an idea the other night. How do we prove that tank is more impactful or DPS is more impactful or support is more impactful? How do you guys prove that? How do you guys test that? I had an idea. Because you can't go, all the high rank players are DPS, because that just might be the popularity of the role or how many people play it or the chances of finding a really talented player by rolling 1,000 dice versus 100 dice or whatever. Here, check this out. Okay, here's how you do it. You guys, how does a matchmaker work? You have 5 players of a similar skill level in a lobby, and you play. But not every role is equal rank. For example, you guys have seen the rank spectrum, right? This is a Platinum 1 to Diamond 3 lobby. Okay. What are the odds, and they can have numbers on this, that if you have one Diamond 3 player in the lobby and the rest is Plat 1, what if the Diamond 3 player is your tank? What if the Diamond 3 player is your support? What if the Diamond 3 player is your DPS? What if you have 2 Diamond 3 players? 1 tank, 1 support, 1 tank, 1 DPS, or both DPS or both supports. You get what I'm saying? And what you do is you see if there's any discrepancies in the win rate between when the higher ranked player is the tank, they're more likely to win. Slightly. Or the higher ranked players are the supports, they're more likely to win. I agree with you, Judo Punch. They may have those metrics, but we've not heard a single thing about them. Now, maybe they don't want to talk about it. But I feel like tank is the most impactful role based off of the bloat of the kit and from my experience in the professional Overwatch League. But honestly, professional Overwatch League isn't the same thing as ranked. You know, I don't know. Maybe there's some variable that I'm not considering here. And I think that's the way that you'd have to test it. I think that's the role that you have to test it. Is which role is the most impactful based off of with the rank discrepancy. So I hope that makes sense. I definitely want to ask that question at some point in the future and maybe see what we can. I don't know what we do with that information is the only thing. You know, I think what you do with that information is you would say, tank is, we're proving here that tank is already very impactful. Hey, let's consider how we approach that moving forward. You get what I'm saying? But you know, I don't know. Something to consider. You would need a really large sample size, you know. But you know, the lower ranked tank still wins a disproportionate amount of games compared to the lower ranked support, and you know, I'm sure a lot of it also has to factor in the hero selection. But I think like you can paint with a broad brush here because if you know, yeah, that's the thing there, right? That's the thing there, Judo, right? If the community had that information, would it be weaponized? Yes, probably. Posture check, thank you. Here's what you could do, though. Here's what you could do. You guys know what the ultimate political move? Do the research. Only leak the results if it's good. Only leak the results if the impact of every roll is close. You know, like, hey, see, we told you. If it's bad, like if tank is like, you know, like 5% more impact than other role, they just, you know, hush it up. You know what I'm saying? CIA, that son of a gun. You know, cement boots off the edge of the Hudson. You know what I'm saying? We're not talking about that again. Yeah, we're not going to talk about it because I'm only half joking here because we talked about it. Like, maybe that's part of the expense. Like what if tank is the more impactful role in 5v5, but it's the more miserable role? And so like if you eat your vegetables, you have a slightly more impact. Now, obviously, Graham, no. Now, if they have like a much bigger impact, then yeah, we wouldn't want that. But you know, I mean, it's not the okay. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I'm gonna get JFK to leak the dead, dude. I am done, man. How could they test it without changing how ranked works? Well, they don't need to test it because if you think about it right now, there's already a ranked spectrum in almost every single ranked game. Every single ranked game. There's very rarely bronze 4 to bronze 4. You know what I'm saying? It's plat 1 to diamond 2 or bronze 4 to bronze 2 or, you know, champion 5 to GM 2, right? So you can already run the numbers here. But like when there's the tank is one of the high ranked players, like you could figure it out, right? You can just run it as it is right now. You don't need it. You already have, in theory, the data to test this. So, and yeah, if you wanted, you could do it only in the wider matches where there's at least 3 tiers difference, you know? But I think that's the most efficient way of doing things. But I'd be curious. I feel like it's one of those questions that I'm almost scared to ask because I don't want to feel like they have to answer it because I'm sure that they could do that. I'm sure that they could do that. I've asked a lot of questions about like I even asked questions about like predicting loss streaks based off of like a player tilt queuing. I had that question with Gavin, I think in LA, like, can you predict a tilt queue? If a player's lost 3 games and re-queues within 5 minutes, do you give them a modifier or whatever? Well, no, because Barbazul, that data is for the lobby. We're looking for the individual. You have to break down the lobby into individual stuff, you know? Gavin said they don't have the stuff for that specifically just yet. Amari, get down. Get down. But yeah. So I don't know. But man, there's so many things that you can do with it. And I freaking love talking with Gavin about it because Gavin loves his job. And he's always coming up, cooking up with some good stuff. So, you know, it's always fun. But yeah, I mean, I got to give this one. What would you guys grade this director's take from Aaron? I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10. And the only point subtracted is because my Spilo points. I think it was pretty good. I think he did a good job. Yeah, I think he did a great job. Yeah, he did a good job. Good news, really good news for really wherever you stand on the fence. That I think that here's the thing: if there's a percentage of you guys out there that really think that Aaron said nuance 11 out of 10, that's true, Kyle. That's true. He did say nuance. If you guys are like a diehard 5v5er, you lose nothing with a 6v6 test, outside of maybe some Q things which they're aware of. You lose nothing. Like I'm a big pickable passives hater, right? At least I just not a fan. But I appreciate that they tested it. You know, I don't think you can know for sure. You just can't. Life is too complicated. Games are too complicated to know. Like I think that there are very few things that you can look at objectively and be like, this is not going to be good for sure. And I know it's ironic me saying that, Mr. Patch Notes guy, but especially stuff on this scale, you just don't know. So I'm glad that they're testing it. I'm glad they're addressing the elephant in the room. It was well done, and so on. Megan. I don't even know what Megan's responding to, but yeah. Listen, what's the solution to the engine issues? I don't know anything about that, man. I'm not the guy to be asking. Hey, Megan, good to see you, mate. Yeah, this is good. I'm glad that this was put out there. I'm sure it took a lot of guts to write this up, and it was well written. Kudos to Aaron. Well done. Blizzard is in our walls. Yep, always has been. Yeah. Calms down with the fighting. Yeah, I mean, it will. This will definitely calm it down for sure. This will definitely calm it. It won't fix the issue because a lot of it is community driven, but it will simplify. Less has been used this way for over 1,000 years, nearly as long. For more than 200 years, almost every usage writing in English has declared such use to be wrong. The receive rule seems to have originated with the critic who expressed it not as a matter of personal preference. Respectfully, Poivin, I don't give a frick. If I could be a nerd and critique anybody on anything, then I'm just objectively right. That's how it goes. So, Jacob Clifton, English critic. Screw you. I don't care what the dictionary says. What does the dictionary know? Hearing and doing are not the same thing. Well, you guys gotta understand, everybody's gonna have their dog in the fight. Everyone's got their dog in the fight, right? Everyone's got their bias. We try to be like, I've always challenged you guys to be more like funky, flufful thing for the sub. Encourage you guys to be a lot more nuanced, a lot more patient. And I try to set a good example with that. But I have my opinions too. I have my biases too. And I've been wrong. You know? So, the whole Malga removal joke, I know. But there are a lot of people out there that nobody's going to be ever perfectly happy with the direction the way the game is going, because nobody's ever perfectly happy with anything, ever, in the history of the universe. You get what I'm saying? So, this isn't really news to most of you guys, but it's just a good reminder, I'm perfectly happy with my water bottle. Yeah, well, I'm not. Did you ask my permission before you were allowed to be perfectly happy with your water bottle? Your water bottle sucks, dude. Terrible form. Probably plastic. You're dying from microplastics just as we speak. Looks terrible. Terrible style. Terrible flavor. Doesn't have near enough ounces. Yeah, I think it's even more dangerous. So a little bit more of transparency here. There's even more dangerous because there's and I've noticed this, there's a sense of entitlement as a content creator. You get what I'm saying? Sense of entitlement. Because you get to interact and talk with these people and give a little bit more direct feedback, which they've been really good at receiving, I will say. But that doesn't mean that you're Captain Overwatch. You know, like your vision isn't the game's vision. So you're like, oh, they're going to listen to me now. Well, yeah, maybe. No, I don't know. Like maybe they don't agree with everything, right? So, you know, I think that's definitely been a moment for me. I think more of my frustration with some of the stuff in the past has been because I don't really know what the vision is, period. And I've talked about that before. But, you know, my vision is not always the best vision, you know. I mean, I've seen people on Reddit, you know, flat out say, like, thank goodness Spilo isn't the game designer, you know. And I think that that's the case for anybody. Do you think this will be the reason for the first ever Samito positive video? I mean, Samito was positive about Juno's release, you know. That entitlement is natural because your community generally agrees with you. Right. So the entitlement comes because I have the ability to give more direct feedback. So I'm sure, like, surely they'll listen to my brilliant ideas. But also, I think you guys do a pretty good job of keeping me honest for the most part. But we do have a bit of an echo chamber. It's impossible to avoid it. Right? That's why I try to expand my community as I can and get new ideas and take criticism. But, you know, if you agree with me, you're here for the most part. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here for the most part. So, do you think the 66 format necessarily demands more heal botting, or is there a way around that? Yeah, see, I don't know. That's what I think that there might be a way around it, but I haven't thought about it enough. I haven't thought about it enough, so I can't say. There probably is. Probably is a way around it. I disagree in all your takes ever. Yeah, well, good. I like to disagree at my monitor, so you just can't yell back. Yeah, that's the thing. You guys can scream at your monitor all you like, but I can't hear you. Did this blog read like Chat GPT? Nah, no way somebody says that. I can't tell what Megan's responding to. Guys, I'm a shill here. Oh, Honey Token said that. Yeah. See, so guys, I have to fulfill my shill responsibilities. Man, you guys are so cynical. Bro, the asteroid nowadays this is like Vietnam 2.0. I've never seen a more cynical, like, bunch of people, man. This must have been what, like, the boomers, let him chill, guys. I love Automod catches Megan. This is must have been what the boomers felt like in the 60s, you know what I'm saying? What do you think this developer take means for Overwatch's future? I mean, it tells you, you know, it tells you, like I said, my only negative is there's not a direct addressing of some of the issues with 5v5, right? With all the issues anyway. But it tells you what the plan is, right? More format testing, 6v6 potential open tweaking later on. So, yeah, like the whole like disillusionment of, you know. Yeah. Do you think executive people are against 66? Man, I have no idea. I can understand that conjecture because it might be an easier to monetize model, maybe. I don't know, but like, I don't know. Do appreciate you responding back. Yeah. So just in case you guys weren't sure, Blizzmaking is not actually a real human being. When we went to LA, we were able to visit their seed pods where they actually spawn them at the Blizzard they're actually they're just spawned there. They create life down there and they come out fully formed, just repeating the issues of the hive mind. Yeah, it's a collective intelligence. They don't even have to sign an NDA because like it's signing an NDA versus yourself. You don't need to, you know. So you guys didn't see an Invasion of the Body Snatchers? You know, like those seed pods. There's like we saw the warehouse. It's pretty freaky. Yep. I know I'm not a shill. I'm telling you like it is, man. It's the hive mind, yeah. They harvest them after each patch. No, they just recycle them, you know. But yeah, something like that.